Happy Sabbath, everyone. That's a blessed Sabbath. I pray that the peace of the Lord be with you all. Last year, I talked with some people about North Carolina, where we live now. We discussed how safe North Carolina is from natural disasters. We talk about what a great place North Carolina is to live in because there are no major natural disasters, while other regions experience floods and fires every year. When we shared those thoughts, I felt lucky and grateful to live in such a safe place. But when I heard the news of major flood in Libya and an earthquake in Morocco at the time, my heart ached as I thought about the people who died in pain. I was ashamed of myself for saying that I was happy to be living in a safe place, and I even felt sorry for the people who died. The number of deaths due to floods in Libya exceeded 30,000, and more than 10,000 people were missing. People who barely managed to survive the flood tried to bury the overflowing bodies without even having time to take care of themselves. However, they had trouble finding dry land to bury the bodies. In Morocco, the death toll from the earthquake reaches 3,000. The entire village was flattened overnight. News came from all over the bodies of family members had been found, and people suffered from unbearable grief. In the face of this enormous tragedy, where thousands of lives were lost in one day, I was so flustered and did not know what to do at the time. The evening I heard on the news that thousands of people had died, I sat down to dinner with my family. We were able to have a peaceful dinner because nothing had happened to us. But it was complicated to think that I was living on the same planet as them while they died from earthquake and floods. And I was here having dinner in peace with my family. Do I have nothing to do with their deaths? After Cain killed Abel, God asked Cain where his brother Abel was. At the time, Cain answered that he did not know. Then God said, "Your brother's blood cries out to me from the ground." Abel was dead, and Cain said he did not know where Abel was. But God hoped that this awful event would resonate in Cain's heart. God wanted Cain to recognize the meaning of Abel's death. Of course, we did not kill people in Libya and Morocco, but their deaths are a clear warning to the living. Their death make us think about how to live the remainder of our lives. Their death warn us that certain unprepared for events may occur. Their death tells us that the end of this world is not that far away. They remind us that we don't have much time left. Every time there is news of a global natural disaster or war like this, I turn to Matthew chapter 24. Matthew 24, 7 and 8 says, "For nation will arise against nation, and kingdom against kingdom, and there will be famines and pestilences and earthquake in various places. All these are the beginning of sorrows." He is telling us that there will be wars and natural disaster all over the world, and that all of this is just the beginning. However, the beginning of sorrow refers to the beginning of birth pains. In other words, although it involves the tremendous pain and suffering, it will be the start of a new creation on this earth. What does this mean? Chapter 24 of the Gospel of Matthew discusses what will happen on this earth before Jesus returns. When Jesus returns, all human civilizations will disappear. A major event will occur on this earth, one that cannot be compared to any natural disaster humanity has ever experienced. And everything on this earth will collapse and disappear. Later, the kingdom of God will be re-established on this earth. Although there will be numerous natural disasters and destruction, these are only the beginning, and the end is coming soon when everything on this earth will be destroyed. After everything collapses and disappears, a new kingdom, the kingdom of God, will surely emerge. Therefore, if we see terrible natural disasters and events destroying what humans have built, we should know that the countdown to the end of this world has already begun. Every time we hear news of disaster and suffering, we must recognize it as a warning and seek the way to life. Please don't think that this natural disaster and destruction are just events happening in a distant country and have nothing to do with you. We must prepare even more for the end of the world. However, rather than waiting for the despair that comes with the end of the world, we must prepare to follow the path of life prepared by God. Someone might ask, are the days we live in now really the last days? But it's not important whether we know if we are living in the last days or not. Knowing when the world will end is not important. It is more important for us to live as if we are at the end of this world as people living in the last days. The deaths of thousands of people killed by earthquake and flood serve as a warning to those of us who live in peace. They urge us to live as if we are at the end of the world. In the Bible, there is a person who lived at the end of the world and welcomed a new world, Noah. By examining Noah's life before God's judgment, we can understand what we should do to prepare for the end of the world. The book of Hebrews says this about Noah. Hebrews 11:7 states, "By faith Noah, being divinely warned of things not yet seen, moved with godly fear, prepared an ark for the saving of his household." First, he had been warned about things not yet seen and was aware of them. Do you expect that in 10 or 20 years, a wonderful world created by humans will unfold on this earth? Interestingly, many scientists and futurists predict that a new world will begin in 2030. They say that air pollution will be greatly reduced because the world political leaders have promised. They claim that with the rapid development of AI, our lives will fundamentally change and a new and wonderful world will emerge. They also suggest that individuals will be able to purchase the flying cars and the human will be able to live in the deep sea and in space. They say that the money and economic systems we use now will be completely changed. Religiously, it is said that there will be unity rather than conflict and strife. They speak as if a new world will unfold before us in 2030. But everyone, please don't be fooled by their false hopes. The world will never be better than it is now. Look around the world. The countdown to the end of the world has already begun. For us, hope is not the utopia that humans promise, but the salvation that the Lord prepares and that we receive through faith. Our hope is to be saved from this land that is about to destroy it and disappear. So whenever you see things happening in the world, don't act as if nothing is happening. Instead, heed God's warning. Look with the eyes of faith at what will soon come to pass and prepare to leave this earth. Like Noah, understand the warning and prepare to enter the ark. The end of the world is just around the corner, and we don't have much time left. Second, as Noah lived through the end of the world, he lived in fear of God. He was a man who understood the importance of fearing God. He lived his life acknowledging that God is the creator and that he is greater than anything and anyone in the world. Because he always believed that God was alive, he did not live solely according to his own thoughts. When you hear about the frightening events happening in the world recently, it may seem like people these days have nothing to fear. These people appear to live their lives according to their desires and greed and thoughts, doing whatever they want. There doesn't seem to be any fear retraining them. They don't fear causing pain to others or destroying their own lives. They do whatever they want without hesitation. Their desires are their gods, and their greed is their absolute ruler. This is typical of people who do not fear God. Those who fear God do not live according to their own desires and greed. Because they know God, they cannot live like that. Recently, I happened to listen to a song by a popular singer. He's quite well known. Have you ever heard the JYP songs Halftime? If you listen closely to the lyrics, it sounds more like a testimony of his faith than a pop song. The lyrics are as follows. Just as if you want to use the Galaxy correctly, you ask Samsung. And if you want to use the iPhone correctly, you ask Apple. It is natural that if you want to live your life correctly, you should find the person who created humans. And if you want to live the world correctly, you should find the person who created the world and ask him. I'm ashamed of what I've been saying all this time. If I admit, ask, and trust again, that's when I start living. If I believing and believing again, that day will be my birthday. In this song, after finding the Lord who created man, he confesses how shameful his past life was. He says that the day he began believing God was the day he was reborn. From the lyrics alone, this song sounds more like a confession of faith than pop music. These days, the singer studies the Bible and gives lectures in various places about the wonders of how he discovered and came to know God. I believe his life clearly shows how a person who lived without fear while at the peak of desire and greed changed after discovering God. People who fear God do not live according to their desires and greed. They do not follow the desires of the world. I hope you reflect on the way you are currently living. The end of the world is coming. I hope you become a person who fears God and is in awe of Him. We don't have much time to let go of our desires and greed and return to God. Third, Noah was a person who knew God's grace and walked with God. Genesis 6, 8, and 9 says, "But Noah found grace in the eyes of the Lord. Noah was a just man, perfect in his generations. Noah walked with God." Noah was a man who walked with God. Companionships means walking at the same pace as the person walking with you. We can say that we walk together only when we match each other's speed and steps. When I was young, whenever my family went out somewhere together, my father would always walk in front, with my mom and me following behind. It was always like that when we walked together. Although we were clearly heading in the same direction, each person was walking separately. Even if we are traveling in the same direction, it does not mean we are walking together. You are companions only when we walk at the same speed. Noah was a person who walked in the same direction and at the same pace as God. He was not a person who went ahead of God. He was not someone who preached things that were not God's will or who showcased himself more than God. He was a person who studied God's will and lived according to it. Noah was not a person who fell behind God. He was not someone who prioritized his own needs before doing God's work. Building the ark and fulfill God's will were always his top priorities throughout his life. Walking with God means giving more importance to the process rather than the result. No matter what you do, it's not enough to simply attend church regularly. It is important to encounter God here. You shouldn't just think about spreading the gospel in any way. You should consider whether the way you spread it is beautiful and good. It is not just important to accomplish what God has told us to do, but to allow people to experience God's love without being hurt in the process. A person who walks with God is someone who embodies and reflects the heart of God. A person who walks with God is not someone who shows great and wonderful success, but someone who demonstrates faithfulness to God. Obtaining salvation does not mean running toward a distant God, but walking to heaven alongside the God who is next to us. Is God next to you right now? Are you living these last days close to the Lord? Please do not miss out on the grace that God has already given us to live closer to Him. When we discover, remember, and live with the grace that God has given us, we can walk closer with Him. God continues to show us grace and provide reasons to walk with Him. If we do not discover and remember that grace, we will live without understanding why we should walk with God and why we should live close to Him. Noah, who lived in the last days, was a person who recognized God's grace and walked with Him. The end of the world is just around the corner. We don't have much time to walk with God in this world. I hope that you and I will draw closer to God now, rather than waiting for someday when we will have greater faith. Recently, I saw something that made me realize that the end of the world really is just around the corner. Everyone, have you ever heard of AI Jesus? It is a website where Jesus answers questions live in real time, 24 hours a day. If you go to this site and post a question, Jesus, created by an AI program, will respond. Although it sometimes gives strange answers, it feels as if Jesus is directly addressing our problem. And there's something called Text with Jesus, where you can chat with Jesus. Of course, the actual Jesus does not answer. But when a question is asked, the AI program responds by quoting a Bible verse. You might feel as if you are chatting with Jesus like you would with a friend. Even though you clearly know it is an AI program, you can get the feeling of hearing answers to your prayers directly from Jesus. Aside from this, there are many apps and websites related to AI Jesus. But everyone, these are all fake Jesus. It is a fake Jesus who offers misleading comfort and incorrect teachings. When I heard about this program, Matthew 24:23 came to mind. Then if anyone says to you, "Look, here is the Christ," or "There," do not believe it. We're witnessing the event that are recorded in Matthew 24, which would occur before the coming of the Lord. What are your choices as the end of the world nears? Do you hear a countdown to the end of the world every time you see natural disaster events and accidents happening these days? Please do not ignore the warnings being delivered to you. Live as people living in the last days. As the end of the world approaches, I hope you will fear God and live with greater awe of Him. Please let go of your desires and greed. I hope you study God's will, draw closer to the Lord, and walk with Him until the end. How much time do we have left? We don't have much time. I would like to conclude with my sincere hope that you and I will reflect on the end of the world and prepare for the day of the Lord's coming, even when it seems safe. May God bless you all. Thank you.